Alright, this should be the third and final video on replacing the generator or alternator on a 1979 Super Beetle Cabriolet. There was a lot of issues with dust when the alternator went out, and there was a lot of metal shavings all in here, so I cleaned all this out. We've taken this heat shield out and given it a fresh spray of some paint after cleaning it very thoroughly. Cleaned these engine flashings right here, these shrouds here for the heat shield, and we've managed to put the heat shield, the fan shroud, back into the engine. You see that's got a fresh coat of paint on there as well. So anyway, these are just sitting in place. We still need to tighten these up, and what I want to cover is some of the pitfalls and things to look for when you're putting this fan shroud back in. First of all, you have to put the alternator and the fan shroud in as a piece, so it's kind of large and cumbersome. You have a limitation in the geometry here, so you can only work with as high up as it is right here, and then you have to be cautious for the oil cooler, which is it's like right about here. So when you're setting it in there, you want to make sure that there's I don't know if you can see, there's like this little flap right here. That thing so it's going to be a problem. So you want to set that in so that the flap is oriented so that it's going to fall into its little slot right there. All while you're taking very close care to make sure that you don't mess with the oil cooler. This little bump in the fan back here. This is where the oil cooler goes, right in this little section here. So just be careful when you're putting it in there. Another thing to be careful of is this throttle cable. It's kind of like a spring, and it wants to fling back and be straight. So you might get it halfway on and then retrieve this throttle cable and make sure that it's not going to get pinched or cut as you seat this back into place. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier on is this little 10mm bolt right here. When you're setting the fan shroud in, you can see there's just a sheet of metal right here, and then the fan shroud goes on the inside right there. There is a nut welded into that fan shroud that this bolt receives. There's another one on the other side, but when you're setting it in, just make sure that the fan shroud goes inside so that it'll line up in there. What you may want to do is to put this bolt on just loosely so that it will slide down into that slot. I didn't do that, but that might be a way where you can make sure that it goes in the right direction. So anyway, next thing that we have lined up here is to deal with all the wiring. So this wiring harness right here is the primary. This goes to the air box. It's the air meter, so it's fuel injected. There's a couple of really ugly connections in here. For instance, these two connectors right here, they get connected here and here. Now, you don't want to install those until you've got the pulley on and you've adjusted the belt, because the travel for the belt goes on the outside, and these wires, they connect in a loop, and they're extending between the pulleys here. So you have to be very cautious to make sure that when these are installed, that they're routed in such a way that they don't touch the wires, or the wires don't touch the belt. The belt might have a little bit of play, so don't make it really close. But basically, these two wires have to be routed, and then you can use this pipe right here as an anchor point, and you run the wires along this pipe, and then back up along the back side here. So you don't want to connect those straight away. And the other thing is, you can see these boots have gotten kind of nasty, and if you look kind of close, you can see the wires. They're a little bit frayed. Again, this is right where the fan or the belt runs across, and it might very well be that we had a little bit of touching there. You can see these boots have been replaced. Probably the connectors themselves have been replaced at some point. So there's a join right here where that was installed. Same thing with this one, it has a join. These old nasty rubber boots, we're gonna see what we can do with some heat shrink to revitalize those, so we have a good seal. And I want to get rid of, well, maybe not get rid of, but I want to cover all this nasty brown covering. I'd much rather have a black covering like this. This is the primary. These go in here to the alternator right there. So anyway, there's going to be some wire management that I'm going to take care of, and you can also see I don't have my throttle body installed yet. But as we've been refreshing and renewing and trying to make things look nice and clean, I've polished the alternator. There's a lot of hoses and whatnot that are going to cover up all this. This hose in particular goes from this connector right here, and it goes up and it goes to the back there. So it's going to cover up all that nice clean paint and polish. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can get some stainless hoses to replace these so that they don't look so, you know, old and nasty in front of all the nice clean stuff. So there's a bunch of hoses that are going to get that treatment. This is the crankcase breather hose right here. A couple of other hoses that connect to the main air box right here. So we're going to take a look and see what we can do to make those hoses look a little nicer before we put them back in place. So let's get started with this. Here's an interesting observation and something you want to be aware of. So these two little bolts right here hold this strap in place. And the strap goes in like that. Oops. All right, so no matter how much you tighten that, you can see the strap is engaged to its limit right there, and it's sitting flat over here, sitting flat. But it's it won't matter how much you tighten it, it's not gonna, the strap's not gonna get tight. Evidently, this replacement alternator is the outside diameter of this centerpiece, the main body of it, is thinner than the original. So the original is 110 millimeters, if you can see that right there, and some change. But the new one, it's visibly, you can see just by eyeballing it, it's skinnier. So I'm going to have to put a small sheath of something behind here to make that strap engage. So just FYI, don't trust it. It might not be the same. All right, so there you can see I put a little strap of some filler material in there. This is a hard cardboard material. It's a kind of a paper product, very similar to this, but this is plastic. But anyway, I've added that in there. Really easy to cut out and shape. But you may, just FYI, just be aware, don't expect that to tighten. And if you're pulling on this and it's wobbling, that's really pretty much the most important thing that holds this fan shroud in place. The only other thing is those two little bolts on the side. But this is the one thing, because once you start to pull this pulley tight, if you don't have something on this end, then the pulley is going to pull the fan forward. So just, get your geometry right. Make sure that this strap is actually holding this thing down nice and tight. All right, moving on. Let's put this pulley on. All right, so there's our pulley in. Belt nice and tight, nice and snug. A little bit of flex in it, but not too much. I'm good with that. It turns over without making any noises, so everything's good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start looking at installing all the rest of the ancillary devices. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to put this fuel rail in. The fuel rail is kind of just a kind of a fitted pipe. But I think since this is sort of an alloy of aluminum, We're going to go ahead and scrub this down and polish it up so it's nice and shiny as well. It'll be a nice little accent, and it will help to keep that nice and clean. So let's go ahead and get this thing cleaned up, and then we'll install that. It gets a fitting here. It gets a fitting right here, and another one on the other side over there. You can see it right there. All right, there you go. Fuel line installed. Nice and shined up. I ran a little green shore buoy on it, and then polished the forward facing and top facing sections of it with the polishing wheel on my drill press. So that looks nice and shiny. On to the next thing. I think we're going to start working on this throttle body. We'll get that nice and cleaned up and get that mounted. All right, so this is the throttle body. You can see it has a sensor on it that gets a little electrical cable that goes in there. This little pipe connects to the EGR valve, and this little connector here goes to that vertical, so you can get an idea of just what it would look like in the car. Would be something like this. This is the front-facing portion of that. In that there are a lot of weird shapes, and that there's actually some lettering in here. I'm not gonna sand and polish this aluminum, but I am going to clean this up really well. Obviously, I've got to clean out this nasty throttle butterfly here. I mean, if you look at the back side, it's really bad. So I'll run some carburetor cleaner in that, and we'll get the Dremel out and run a wire brush over this and make that nice and shiny without polishing it too much. Get that thing mounted back on. I think maybe I'll pull this off and get a fresh coat of paint on that too, just to freshen it up. All right, so there's the throttle body in place. See, I've cleaned it up nice. Did a little wire brush action in here. And that this little pipe here, I've got some fresh coat of paint on that. So the next thing up, let's go ahead and get this throttle cable through the hole here. The hole right there. There's a little sheath that goes through that. Let's go ahead and route that through. That way we can set up the throttle linkage as well. All right, so there you go. Got the throttle cable through. This little sheath that goes through, goes all the way through the back. Let me see if you can see. All the way through the back. There it is right there. And it goes back through that little housing, and it will meet up with another sheath back there. So the trick here is that if you pull that sheath back into the shroud just a little bit, you can fish the throttle cable through that opening right there. And once you get it slided through there, then you can back the sheath away, and the throttle cable itself will be a good fish tape. And then once you get the throttle cable all the way through and you get the loop out of it, then you can push the sheath back and make it meet up. I don't know if you can see, but there is another sheath back in there. Now, all right, so there you go. Got the throttle linkage all connected, set up, and that throttle cable has come through and connected with this. So we are ready to move on to putting these hoses in. First hose that needs to go in is right here. This hose will go up to a little emissions device that hangs down from here, and then there's a hose that comes in from this side right here, and that comes up to the breather, which is right there, and then that has a hose that also goes up to the top up there. There's 3 hoses in all that come up to this device. One of them's a small one that comes off. That little device right here, I think this needs to be cleaned up a little. That's kind of nasty looking. So we'll clean that up and mount that so we can get those hoses going. We may have to actually go to the store and replace some of these hoses. They're not that bad, but they do have some cracks on the inside, and I kind of want to refresh them. They're a little hard and brittle, so we'll probably replace those hoses as well. All right, so there you go. I got all my new hoses installed and routed, and I've installed the wires that go to the alternator. And you can start to see my justification for just polishing the outside of a standard alternator rather than spending $200 and getting a chrome alternator. once you get this thing installed, it's practically invisible. It's so deeply embedded inside all of this other hoses and pipes and wires, and then the air box goes on top of here. You won't see much of that alternator. So I think it was really smart to just get a rebuilt alternator and then polish it up real nice so that it looks like it's a chrome alternator without spending $200. But I'm on a sidetrack there. So the last thing that I'm going to cover in the video today is this last little connection. So the wiring harness comes through, and it kind of comes through this little area right here, and it plugs into a couple of little connectors as it goes. And this last connector right here, it comes out between the belt, and it loops out, and it comes back, and it connects right here. Well, it kind of looks like this, right? That's where it's supposed to go. Well, this boot right here needs to be fortified, and these wires are kind of exposed, and the boot's kind of frayed a bit. And so you can see it's been replaced one time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this connector right here, and I'm going to reinforce this boot with some 4-to-1 heat shrink. Now, typical heat shrink is only 2-to-1, but what we're going to do is we're going to put this heat shrink on up to the edge of the boot right here, and we're going to shrink it down, and it's going to cover as much of this as we can get it to cover. And hopefully that will reinforce that boot so that as it comes around the corner right here, it won't crack and bend the wires, and it'll be a bit more reinforced. We don't have to worry about it being damaged. So that's the last task that I'm going to cover today. So let's go ahead and get started on that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to solder these together. So I have a really small connection right here. I got some heat shrink here to rebuild after we get that solder on there. And then this is the big heat shrink. It's a 4-to-1, and that will, you see I've kind of flared it out here. This will go on the boot, and we'll get this thing nicely rebuilt so we don't have any problems with the loop as it goes around here. So I'm going to go ahead and solder these up, and then we'll move forward with the heat shrinks. I just wanted to capture the before and after. This is a waterproof 4-to-1 heat shrink, and I went as far back as I could, and I did make it so that I can get it up over the edge of the boot here. I'm going to go ahead and put the heat on this, and we'll see what it looks like, but I think this is going to give me a really good solution here. So this is the before, and then I'll heat shrink it and show you the after. Just a little on the warm side. So you'll notice a little shininess here. These waterproof heat shrinks, they when you get them hot, the inside becomes sticky. So it's like tape, and so that makes it so that it's waterproof. And I purposely started so that it would take up and grab the bottom of the boot here. So I'm really happy with that. I think as soon as that gets cool enough to touch, we'll be able to bend that into a good shape, and that will give me a really good solution for this connector right here. Let me see if I can bend it into shape while it's still hot. Get it going the right way. Here's I had it right. Yeah. There we go. There you go. That is a whole lot better looking, and I think it's going to protect that really well. So let's let that dry, and then we'll do a little bit of wire management to keep it away from the belt here, and we'll call that done. So that's all I got to cover tonight. Obviously, there's some additional stuff that needs to be put on here, but that's all I have time for on this video. But I'm calling this this alternator installed. And if I could just stop putting things into here, that would be great. So that is the installation of an alternator on a 1979 Super Beetle. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comment section. I'll be glad to answer anything that you might have. Or if you have some good suggestions, aside from helping me out, it'll help other people out who are watching this video. That's all I have. Subscribe. Cheers.